As soon as I got into the car, my grandson suddenly covered my mouth and said, "Don't say anything, Grandma. Are they listening to us?" I listened to him, and what I discovered was a truth so shocking it knocked me to the ground. "I'm glad you're here. Stay until the end and tell me which city you're watching my story from. I want to know how far it has reached." I stepped out into the parking lot. It was already completely dark. My old sedan was parked quietly in a secluded corner, the faint light from the street lamp reflecting off the layer of dust on the windshield. I opened the door, about to get in when a cold hand suddenly covered my mouth. My heart pounded. A shiver of fear ran down my spine. I wanted to scream, but a trembling voice whispered in my ear, "Don't say anything. Are they listening to us?" I turned, my heart racing, and saw Liam, my grandson, huddled in the back seat. His eyes were wide open, shining in the darkness, filled with fear. Liam was barely 10 years old, but his face at that moment looked strange, too mature, as if he had seen something terrifying. I closed the door silently, my hands still trembling, trying to keep calm so he wouldn't get even more scared. "What are you doing here? You scared me to death," I whispered, my voice choked by the shock. Liam tilted his head and pointed a finger towards the office building windows. On the upper floors, some lights were still on, casting a yellowish glow like watchful eyes. I held my breath, following the direction of his finger, my mind a tangled mess. "I heard Mom and Ms. Jenkins in the office. Were they talking about you?" Liam murmured so softly I had to lean closer to hear him. "What were they saying about me?" I asked quietly, trying to sound calm, though my heart was pounding violently. Liam squeezed my hand tightly, his cold little fingers clutching me as if he feared I might vanish. "Mom said that in a few days you wouldn't have anything, that she would make you sign something, and then you'd disappear from this house." Liam's words were like a knife straight to my heart. I froze, as if the ground beneath my feet had opened up. Bethany, my daughter-in-law, whom I had loved like my own child, was plotting against me. I wanted to scream, to run to the building and confront them, but seeing Liam's frightened eyes, I understood I couldn't act impulsively. The boy was trembling, and I felt his fear so intensely that it seemed the darkness itself was swallowing me whole. Then I understood that this afternoon's meeting had been a perfectly planned charade. Bethany had been there with her sweet smile, her voice soft as honey. She always called me Mom, with such an affectionate tone that anyone would believe it was sincere. But today she insisted again and again on the topic of signing a power of attorney, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Mom, it's just some papers to help the company run better," she said, her eyes shining but cold. I nodded, though deep down I felt uneasy. There was something in her tone that made my skin crawl, as if every word had been carefully chosen to hide an intention. Sarah Jenkins, my trusted assistant for so many years, was sitting next to Bethany, nodding her head. That left me disconcerted. Sarah, whom I had considered a friend, who knew better than anyone how much effort it had taken me to build Vance Industries, was supporting Bethany without objection. "Mrs. Vance, this is a good opportunity for you to rest a little," she said, avoiding my gaze, her eyes fixed on the table as if hiding something. I felt trapped in a snare, in a plan I couldn't yet decipher. Mr. Harrison, the family lawyer, was also present at the meeting. I had always trusted him, but today he was acting strange. He avoided eye contact and kept flipping through papers as if trying to hide his nervousness. When I asked him directly about a clause in the power of attorney, he stammered and quickly changed the subject. Distrust began to grow within me, like a small, sharp wave piercing my chest. Suddenly, I remembered Andrew, my son. He had been working remotely for several months, leaving all company matters in the hands of Bethany and Sarah. I didn't feel at ease, so I took on most of the work myself. Every day I stayed late at the office, reviewing the ledgers, reading every contract, just to make sure everything was still under control. But because of this, my health began to deteriorate. My head ached, my vision blurred from lack of sleep, and my heart felt heavy with loneliness. Andrew was my pride, but now he seemed too distant, leaving me alone to face the growing doubts. Suddenly, a shadow crossed the parking lot, its slow footsteps echoing in the silence. Liam quickly ducked, pulling me down to follow him. I also stayed silent. My heart pounded. My eyes were fixed on that figure until it disappeared completely. When nothing could be heard, Liam raised his head, his face pale. "Mom saw me," he whispered, his voice trembling. "She told me not to tell anyone, but I'm so scared, Grandma." Hearing those words, I felt my heart clench. I hugged Liam tightly, feeling his small body tremble in my arms. "It's okay. I'm here with you," I murmured, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to comfort him or myself. Bethany, to whom I had opened my heart, whom I believed would be a support for Andrew and Liam, was plotting to take away the home I had built with blood and tears. The pain overwhelmed me, not only from the betrayal, but also because I realized I had trusted too much, that I had closed my eyes to all the warning signs. The phone in my purse vibrated, and the screen lit up with Sarah's name. I was about to answer, but Liam snatched the phone from me and quickly turned it off. "Don't answer it, Grandma," he said, his voice desperate. "Mom said she's watching everything." I looked into Liam's eyes, where sincerity and fear mingled. I nodded and put the phone away, my heart heavy. Sarah, whom I had considered family, was also part of this scheme. I started the car and drove out of the parking lot, but my mind was a whirlwind. "If you go home with me now, Mom will find out everything," Liam whispered, his voice full of anguish. "Don't go back yet?" I looked at him and could feel his intelligence and bravery despite being just a child. I turned the wheel in another direction, heading straight for the outskirts, far from the office lights and the eyes that were watching us. During the drive, I tried to stay calm, but inside, a storm raged. I had dedicated my life to building this family, to protecting Andrew and Liam, but now it was precisely those closest to me who were turning their backs. The pain came not only from the betrayal, but also from the loneliness, as if I were standing in the middle of darkness, not knowing whom to trust. I stopped the car on a secluded road on the outskirts, where the streetlights barely illuminated the path. A small cafe hidden behind some trees emitted a warm, yellow light from its windows, like a refuge amidst the storm raging within me. I took Liam's hand, and we went inside, feeling his small fingers squeeze mine tightly, as if he feared that if he let go, I would disappear. I ordered him a cup of hot cocoa, and for myself, just a bitter black coffee, hoping it would help me stay awake. But the truth was, my head was spinning, and my heart ached from everything Liam had just told me. Liam sat very close to me. The old wooden chair creaked every time the child moved. He kept looking out the window with those large, curious eyes, as if expecting someone to appear from the darkness. I placed my hand on his shoulder and gently said, "Liam, don't be scared. It's just you and me here." But even I wasn't sure if I was comforting him or myself. That feeling of unease clung to me like an unshakable shadow. I lowered my voice almost to a whisper. "What did you hear? Tell me everything, every detail." Liam bowed his head. His small hands gripped the edge of his shirt tightly, and he murmured, "They said you're dumb, that you'll sign all the papers without reading anything, that afterward, everything will be theirs." Those words were like another stab piercing my chest. Bethany, my daughter-in-law, whom I had treated like a daughter, called me dumb behind my back. I dedicated my entire life to building this company, to caring for this home for Andrew and Liam. And she believes I'm so naive as to hand it all over with my own hands. I tried to stay calm, though my heart ached. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice trembling, though I didn't want Liam to notice. The child nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "Mom even laughed with Ms. Jenkins. She said you'd be left with nothing afterward." His words were like an icy wind blowing over my skin. I imagined Bethany and Sarah in the office, laughing at my pain, and the bitter taste of betrayal filled my mouth like the coffee in front of me. I had trusted Bethany. I thought she would be the one to continue my legacy and take care of the family. But now she was planning to take everything from me, even the roof I had built with my own efforts. A shiver ran down my spine, but I kept my face serene. I didn't want Liam to see his grandma weak. I didn't want him to think I didn't have the strength to protect him. "I understand," I told him, my voice soft but firm. "Don't worry. I'll find a way." Liam looked at me with a mix of doubt and hope, as if he wanted to believe I could fix everything. But the fear still clung to him. Suddenly, the cafe door creaked open, and a man entered. He wore a dark coat. He looked around and stopped at our table before sitting in a nearby corner. Liam immediately ducked his head, clutching my sleeve tightly, as if wanting to become invisible. I felt his fear, and my heart pounded violently. I looked closely at the man and recognized him. David Miller, the former security guard who had worked at Vance Industries for many years. He had always been reliable, with his calm smile at the entrance, but now his presence unsettled me. "Mr. Vance," David approached and said in a deep voice, "Long time no see. How have you been?" I responded with a forced smile. "Fine, thank you." But inside, I was full of doubts. Was his appearance here, at this very moment, a coincidence, or was it also part of a plan I still didn't understand? Liam lifted his head slightly, looked at him, and whispered to me, "I trust him. He used to protect you." His words made me pause. Liam, though so small, was more perceptive than I thought. Perhaps he was right. David had been loyal, and now I needed someone I could trust. I nodded slightly and turned to David, lowering my voice. "Mr. Miller, I need your help. Take Liam and me home safely, but no one must know. They are watching us." David looked at me seriously and replied firmly, "Understood, Mrs. Vance. I'll take care of it." He asked no more questions, and that gave me a strange relief. In a world where I no longer knew whom to trust, his silence was an unexpected comfort. On the way back, David drove through small streets, moving away from the city lights. Liam sat beside me, continuing his story in a trembling voice. "Mom also said that if I ever told anyone, she would disappear, and I wouldn't have anyone anymore." The child's eyes were filled with tears, and I felt as if my heart was being squeezed. Bethany not only had me in her sights, but she also dared to threaten Liam, the grandson I loved more than anything. I hugged him tightly against my chest, whispering, "You are very brave. I'm not going to disappear, so don't worry. I promise." But deep down, I knew how fragile that promise was. I didn't know how I could protect Liam when I myself was lost in this whole mess. As the car was about to reach our neighborhood, David suddenly slowed down, his gaze sharpening in the rearview mirror. "Mrs. Vance, there's a strange car parked a few feet from the entrance. The lights inside are still on." A shiver ran through my body. I looked out the window and saw the faint glow of that car, like a lurking eye in the darkness. "Let's not go home," I said, my voice firm, though inside I was churning. "Take us to Martha's house." David nodded. He turned the wheel in another direction, and I felt a momentary relief as that strange car was left behind. Martha, my lifelong friend, opened the door, her face surprised to see Liam and me there, in the middle of the night. "Eleanor, what's wrong? Why are you here at this hour?" she asked, her voice concerned. I just shook my head. I led Liam to the small living room and whispered, "Martha, keep this a secret. I'll tell you everything later." She nodded without asking more questions, and I knew I had turned to the right person to trust. As Martha went to make tea, Liam pulled me to sit next to him and murmured in a trembling voice, "Grandma, Mom is going to make you sign. Don't sign anything." The child's words sounded like a warning, but also like a plea. I hugged him tightly and nodded. "I know. I'll be careful." But inside, I repeated to myself, "This is just beginning, and I don't know if I'll have the strength to face what's coming." I asked David to take Liam home first, so as not to arouse Bethany's suspicions. If she saw him return with me, she would surely realize that something was wrong. David nodded. He took the child, and I stayed at Martha's house, lying on the old couch, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep that night. Liam's words echoed in my head, mixed with the image of Bethany, smiling sweetly, Sarah avoiding my gaze, and Mr. Harrison flipping through papers with a tense face. I had built this family with all my love and effort, but now I felt like I was in the middle of a chess game, being the only piece that didn't know the rules. The next morning I returned home early, as the sun was just beginning to dissipate the mist. My steps were heavy, as if each one carried an invisible fear. I pushed the door open and entered the living room, and immediately Bethany appeared, carrying a tray with steaming tea. Her smile was radiant, but I could feel the falseness emanating from every feature of her face. "Mom, where were you yesterday? I called you many times and you didn't answer," she said with a honey-sweet voice but with cold eyes, scrutinizing my every reaction. I forced myself to remain calm, though inside everything was a whirlwind. "I went to a friend's house and just stayed to sleep there," I replied, my voice even, as if nothing mattered. But in my head, Liam's words kept ringing about how Bethany and Sarah planned to separate me from my own family. The pain pierced me, not out of fear of losing the company or the money, but from the betrayal of someone I had considered a daughter. I had opened my heart to welcome Bethany into my home. I had taught her step by step how to manage the business, and now she stood before me with a false smile, as if she had never intended to destroy me. Bethany lowered her gaze, then smiled. "You should have just let me know, Mom. I was very worried." Her words sounded like a gentle reproach, but I knew it was just a mask. I watched her in silence, trying to read her every gesture. At that moment, Sarah came out of the kitchen with a notebook in her hand. Her eyes reddened as if she had been crying. She immediately regained her professional demeanor and said in a neutral voice, "Mrs. Vance, you have a meeting with the lawyer today about some transfer documents." I nodded, feigning indifference, but my eyes remained fixed on the notebook. The blue cover looked strange. It didn't resemble any of the company's files. A hunch ran through me, making my chest pound, when Bethany turned to place the tea tray on the table. I seized the moment and dropped my handkerchief near where Sarah was standing. I slowly bent down to pick it up and managed to glimpse the notebook. Among the scribbles, it read, "Power of attorney, urgent signature." My heart skipped a beat. Sarah, whom I had trusted so much, was keeping a secret that could destroy me. I straightened up with a forced smile, but inside, the bitterness of betrayal burned me. I had treated Sarah like family. I had shared the company's difficulties with her, and now she was on Bethany's side, participating in a plan to push me into darkness. At noon, Bethany served a carefully prepared meal. The dishes smelled delicious. Golden tortillas, beef stewed with spices. The whole house was filled with familiar aromas, but I barely took a few bites when I recognized a faint, unmistakable scent, that of the sedatives my mother used to take to sleep. My heart pounded, but I kept my expression calm and uttered some words of praise. "You cook wonderfully, Bethany." Then I excused myself, saying I was tired, and went to my bedroom. As I passed Bethany, I noticed her eyes following me, calculating how much I had eaten. Suspicion grew within me. I couldn't show any sign. As soon as I locked the door, Liam entered through the small back window that I always left slightly open for ventilation. He whispered, his voice trembling, "Grandma, Mom put something in the food. I saw that while she was cooking, she poured a strange powder from a folded paper." His words confirmed my worst fear. I nodded gently, placing my hand on his shoulder. "I know, sweetie, but don't say anything, do you hear? Leave it to me." However, looking into his large, frightened eyes, I understood that he feared not only for me, but also for himself. His mother, Bethany, had gone so far as to intimidate her own son to get what she wanted. The pain throbbed like an open wound, salted. Not only Bethany's betrayal, but also the fact that Liam, my little grandson, was trapped between truth and lies. At dusk, I called David and asked him to watch for strange cars around the house. His deep voice resonated over the phone. "Mrs. Vance, A black sedan appeared last night, parked a few feet from the entrance. The car's lights are still on, but I haven't seen anyone go in or out. A shiver ran through my body. Who was watching me? Bethany? Sarah? Or someone else I didn't yet know? I asked David to stay alert, and the feeling of unease clung to me like an unremovable shadow. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lying in bed, I heard a faint noise in the yard. I slowly got up, pulled back the window curtain, and looked down. Under the faint moonlight, I saw Sarah standing alone with her phone in hand, her voice broken. "My daughter, I have to do it. Otherwise she's going to die." She cried as she murmured, as if pleading with someone. My heart pounded hard, but it wasn't from fear, but from a mix of rage and compassion. Was Sarah, whom I had trusted, being forced, or was she just pretending like Bethany? I stepped back, my head buzzing, unable to understand what was happening, but I stored that detail, determined to investigate more in the morning. At dawn, with the streets still empty, I used going to the grocery store as an excuse to leave the house. But instead of heading to the usual place, I followed Sarah silently. I saw her enter St. Jude's Hospital with hurried steps, as if fleeing from something. I waited about 30 minutes, parked in a hidden corner, not taking my eyes off the entrance. When Sarah came out, her face was pale and her eyes swollen, as if she had been crying. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, not only for suspecting her, but because deep down, I still wanted to believe that she wasn't betraying me on purpose. But after what Liam had told me, I couldn't let emotion dominate reason. I needed the truth. I entered the hospital, pretending to look for an acquaintance, to approach the information desk. The young receptionist, with a polite smile, checked the records when I mentioned Sarah. "She had an appointment in pediatric cardiology last week for a little girl," she said in a neutral voice. I nodded, feeling as if a stone had sunk into my chest. Did Sarah really have a sick daughter, or was it all part of a plan? I apologized, saying I needed to use the restroom, and quickly left for the parking lot, my mind spinning. As soon as I opened the car door, my cell phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "You will soon have to sign some papers. If you don't, a child will die on the operating table." My heart froze, as if I had been doused with ice water. I read and reread those words, looking for a clue, but only found a cold, direct threat. I didn't respond. I just saved the message with a trembling hand. Who was behind all this? Bethany? Sarah? Or someone else I didn't yet know? I thought of Liam, his terrified gaze, and my soul ripped apart. How could a mother like Bethany use her own son to blackmail me? Upon returning home, I found Bethany already standing at the entrance, as if she knew the exact time of my arrival. "Where were you, Mom? I called you so many times and you didn't answer," she said with a sweet voice, but with sharp eyes that seemed to want to pierce through me. I smiled weakly and replied, "I went to buy some vitamins." Bethany nodded, that smile fixed on her lips. "That's good. Mom's health is the most important thing." But from the upstairs window, Liam peered out with a look full of anguish. I gave him a slight nod as if to tell him I was fine, not to be scared, but inside I knew I was walking on an abyss and that any misstep could lead me to ruin. In the afternoon, Mr. Harrison, the lawyer, called, his voice forced, as if he were reading from a script. "Mrs. Vance, we need to meet to sign the investment power of attorney as soon as possible." I heard a faint murmur behind him, as if someone else was there. I responded briefly, "I'll arrange it," and hung up, my heart heavy. Bethany already controlled everything, from Sarah to Mr. Harrison, and now she was tightening the noose around me. I opened my phone, intending to call Andrew, hoping my son would listen to me. But before I could dial, Bethany suddenly appeared behind me, her voice soft but laden with intent. "He's busy in a meeting. He won't answer, Mom. I'll pass on your message later." I nodded. I turned off my phone, feeling trapped in my own home. I went into my bedroom, closed the door, and immediately Liam slipped in through the window like a small ghost. The child handed me a crumpled paper and whispered, "Grandma, I found it in the trash can. Mom threw it away this morning." I opened the paper and felt my heart stop. It was a photocopy of a property transfer agreement. With the space for my signature already marked, the signing date was in just a few days. A shiver ran through me, realizing my time was running out. "Very well done, sweetie," I told Liam, trying to keep my voice calm, though inside I felt on the verge of an abyss. Bethany not only wanted to steal the company, she wanted to erase me completely from this family. Late at night, with the moon streaming through the window, I heard soft taps on the door. Sarah was there, her eyes red and face drawn. She opened her mouth about to say something, but Bethany's voice came from downstairs, icy. "Sarah, come down now!" Sarah flinched, stepped back and murmured, "Sorry, Grandma." Then she left quickly, as if afraid of being discovered. I watched her go with a mixture of rage and compassion. Was Sarah being forced, or was she just pretending to deceive me? Right after, my phone vibrated again. Another anonymous message. I repeat one last time, sign or lose the child. Surely you don't want an innocent to pay for your mistakes, do you? I looked at Liam, who was sleeping deeply on the armchair in my bedroom, his face helpless. My heart clenched. Bethany had dared to bring Liam into this game too, using my grandson as a threat to break me. I never imagined she could be so cruel. The pain overwhelmed me, not only from the betrayal, but because I understood that I had put Liam in danger by trusting too much in my family. Immediately I called Andrew, and this time, unusually, my son answered. "Mom, what's wrong?" he said distractedly, as if busy with something else. I tried to tell him everything about Bethany, Sarah, and the threatening messages, but Andrew interrupted me. "Mom, just listen to Bethany. I trust her to handle everything. You're imagining things." His words were like a knife cutting my soul. Andrew, the son I had loved and protected my whole life, was now siding with the person plotting against me. I hung up, tears threatening to fall, but I held them back. I couldn't allow myself to be weak. Not now, when Liam still needed me. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my head spinning. I thought of all the years that had passed since my husband and I built this company together. When I held Andrew in my arms and promised him a good future, I sacrificed everything, from sleepless nights to days of arguments with partners, just to keep this family safe. But now I felt like a stranger in my own home. Bethany had taken control of everything, from Sarah, Mr. Harrison, even Andrew himself, and me. At 65 years old, I had to face alone the betrayal of the people I loved most. I clenched my fists, telling myself I couldn't wait any longer. Tomorrow, I would find a way to expose everything before it was too late. But deep down, I knew I was walking a dangerous path. I was not only fighting to protect the company, but also to protect Liam, to hold on to the last hope for this family. The pain of betrayal was still there, burning inside, but I couldn't let it defeat me. For Liam, I had to be strong. The next morning, as the sun was just rising, I went out into the garden to get some fresh air, hoping it would calm my troubled mind. But as soon as I took a few steps, I saw Sarah standing in the corner of the garden, next to the rose bush I had planted when Andrew was a child. She was talking on the phone, her voice broken and trembling. "Please, give me a little more time. I'll get the money, I promise." I froze. Not because I wanted to eavesdrop, but because Sarah's voice was filled with pain, as if she were begging for her own life. When she looked up and saw me, her face turned pale, and she hung up the phone with trembling hands. "Mrs. Vance," she stammered, her eyes wide with fright. I saw her take a step back, as if she feared I would ask her something, but I just nodded gently, forcing a smile, as if nothing was happening inside. I felt a pang. Sarah, who had been my right hand in the company, whom I had trusted as family, now trembled before me like a cornered animal. Was she truly being pressured, or was it another of her acts to deceive me? Doubt gnawed at me, but deep in my heart, I wanted to believe that Sarah had not betrayed me on purpose. I had seen her as a daughter. I had shared the company's most difficult moments with her, and now, seeing the fear in her eyes, I couldn't help but feel compassion. Suddenly, Bethany came out of the house and put an arm affectionately around Sarah's shoulders, as if they were close friends. "Mom, the documents are ready. You just need to sign them," she said with a honey-sweet voice, smiling radiantly but coldly. "Don't worry, they're just some simple papers." Her words made Sarah's face turn even paler, and she clenched her hands tightly, as if holding herself back. I smiled with effort, feigning confidence so Bethany wouldn't suspect, but inside, I felt like I was walking on a minefield. Every word, every glance from Bethany was like a knife reminding me that she, the daughter-in-law I once loved, now planned to drive me out of my own family. The pain of betrayal overwhelmed me not only because of Bethany, but because I myself had been blind to the warning signs and had given her the opportunity to manipulate everything. When I went into the kitchen to get a glass of water, Liam discreetly pulled me into a corner where the light from the window didn't reach. The child whispered, his voice trembling, "Last night, I heard Mom threaten Ms. Jenkins. If she doesn't do it, her daughter will have problems." Liam's words were like an electric shock running through my body. I looked at him immediately. His big eyes were filled with fear, but also with a strange determination. "Are you sure?" I asked, in a voice so low it was almost inaudible. Liam nodded firmly. "I heard it clearly. Mom said she would disappear, and Ms. Jenkins' daughter would never be saved." My heart pounded hard, not only because of what the child had said, but because I understood that Bethany was not only targeting me, but daring to use Sarah's daughter to manipulate her. The pain burned like salt in a wound, not only from Bethany's betrayal, but because Liam, my little grandson, was seeing his own mother become a cruel person. At noon, Sarah brought me a glass of hot milk. She placed it on the table without daring to look me in the eye. She stood there silently, as if awaiting a sentence. I barely took a sip, pretending to drink, but when she turned around, I poured the rest into the nearby planter. The faint smell of sedative I had recognized days ago still lingered, and I didn't dare take a risk. Sarah remained still for a moment, and then suddenly murmured in a voice so low I had to strain to hear, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Vance." Then she rushed out of the room, as if fearing that staying longer would make her reveal what she was hiding. Her apology was like a dagger in my heart. I was increasingly convinced that Bethany had her under control, but the remorse in her voice tore me apart. She was once the person I trusted most, and now she was trapped in a game I still didn't fully understand. That night, with the moonlight streaming through the window, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Liam secretly ran into my bedroom, his face frightened. "Grandma, I saw Ms. Jenkins crying in the hallway. She said her daughter is about to die." The child hugged me tightly, his small body trembling in my arms. My heart ached. Sarah, whom I once considered family, now lived in unbearable fear, and I couldn't help her at that moment. My pain came not only from Bethany's betrayal, but from realizing that I myself had pushed Sarah into this situation by blindly trusting my daughter-in-law and ignoring what was happening around me. I hugged Liam tightly, whispering, "I'll take care of everything. Don't be scared." But inside, I knew I was facing an insurmountable wall. I decided that the next morning I had to go to St. Jude's Hospital once more and confirm everything for myself. I needed to know the truth about Sarah's daughter, if she was truly gravely ill, or if it was another trick by Bethany. When Liam fell asleep in my arms, I looked at his innocent face, and a new determination was born within me. I couldn't allow Bethany to continue manipulating this family, not only for myself, but for Liam, for Sarah, and for the home I had dedicated my entire life to building. The next morning, as the light of dawn barely illuminated the empty streets, I asked David to drive Liam and me to St. Jude's Hospital. I used a routine medical checkup as an excuse, but deep down, I knew I was entering a battle. Liam sat beside me, his small hands tightly intertwined, his gaze filled with concern, but trying to remain firm. I placed my hand on his shoulder and whispered, "Don't be scared, sweetie. I just need to check a few things." However, I myself felt my heart thumping, as if every beat reminded me that time was running out. Bethany, with her false smile and her threats, was tightening the noose around me, and I needed to discover the truth before it was too late. At the hospital's records desk, I looked for Clara. a retired nurse who had worked with my mother many years ago. Clara, with silver hair and a kind smile, recognized me immediately. "Eleanor, long time no see. Are you here for a checkup?" she asked, with a voice full of affection. I smiled, trying to maintain a natural demeanor. "I need to check the information for a girl with the last name Vance, Sarah's daughter, my assistant." Clara nodded. She opened the files on the computer, but a few minutes later she frowned. "There's something strange. This child isn't a cardiology patient. The file was opened only a few weeks ago, and it just says common cold." Clara's words were like a lightning bolt piercing the fog in my head. I felt a glimmer of hope, but at the same time, my suspicions grew. If Sarah's daughter wasn't seriously ill, why was she trembling, crying, and obeying Bethany that way? I asked Clara to see the child's cardiology history in detail, and she, in silence, printed a few pages. When I glanced over them, my heart stopped. Several doctors' signatures looked like unclear scribbles, and the stamps were blurry, as if they had been hastily forged. I gripped the stack of papers, trying to keep my voice steady. "Clara, keep this a secret for me," she nodded with a worried look. "Be careful. It seems someone manipulated these files from outside. I'll make you a few more copies." I thanked her, but inside me, a storm was unleashed. Bethany was not only threatening me, but she had also forged documents to manipulate Sarah. The pain overwhelmed me, not only from my daughter-in-law's betrayal, but for Sarah, who lived trapped in a fear based on a cruel lie. Suddenly, Liam gently tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Grandma, someone's watching us." I turned and saw a man in a dark coat sitting not far away. He held a newspaper, but his eyes were following us closely. My heart pounded in my chest. I felt like I was in a predator's sights. David, who was near the entrance, perceived the situation. He walked towards him and sat at the next table, his gaze icy. The man in the coat became uncomfortable. He quickly got up and left, dropping the newspaper to the floor. I exhaled, but the uneasiness didn't leave me. Who was behind all this? Bethany? Or someone else I didn't yet know? I squeezed Liam's hand and smiled to reassure him, though inside I knew we were walking on dangerous ground. On the way back home, Liam held the copies in his hand and asked in an uncertain voice, "Grandma, is Miss Jenkins's daughter really sick then?" I looked into his big, round eyes, filled with both concern and hope. I replied gently, "Maybe, but it's not as serious as they say. I think your mom exaggerated everything to pressure Sarah. Sarah doesn't know anything. She's convinced her daughter is very sick, and that's why she obeys blindly." My words silenced Liam, but I noticed he squeezed my hand harder, seeking comfort. I felt a lump in my chest thinking about Sarah, trapped in a lie, and Liam, my little grandson, forced to confront the truth that his own mother was the manipulator. Upon reaching the gate, I saw Bethany waiting for us, her face unusually sweet. "Where were you all morning, Mom? I was worried," she said in a sugary voice, though her eyes examined me harshly. I answered calmly, "I went for a medical checkup. I didn't want to bother you." Liam hid behind me and immediately added, "I went with Grandma. The doctor said I'm very healthy." He said it innocently, but I knew he was trying to protect me, and that broke my heart. A 10-year-old boy who should only be thinking about studying and playing was forced to lie to keep his grandma safe. My pain came not only from Bethany's betrayal, but also from knowing that I had allowed Liam to end up in the middle of all this. Bethany took my hand with a warm yet unsettlingly cold gaze. "Mom needs to take care of her health so she can continue to look after the company and the family." She said it with a tone full of concern, but I felt as if a venomous snake was coiling around me. I shivered, though I tried to control myself, and replied with a smile, "Thank you, dear. I'll be careful." When Bethany turned around, I watched her back with the sensation of looking at a stranger, the daughter-in-law I once loved, whom I thought would be a support for Andrew and Liam. Now she was the one trying to push me into darkness. I thought of the past days when I taught Bethany how to keep the ledgers, when I hugged her at Andrew's wedding. All of that now was nothing more than memories torn apart by betrayal. The day of signing the power of attorney finally arrived, and I felt as if I were entering a battle I wasn't ready for. I put on a gray dress, the color I usually chose when I needed serenity, but that day it only made me feel heavier. My heart pounded as I went down to the boardroom, where all eyes were focused on me. I still didn't know how to face Bethany, but I was clear that if I didn't do something, everything I had built, the company, the family, and even trust, would disappear. The pain of betrayal still burned within me, like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Bethany, the daughter-in-law I once loved, was now the one trying to kick me out of my own home. In the boardroom, Bethany and Sarah were already seated, the table full of perfectly arranged papers, like a trap ready to close. Several important shareholders of Vance Industries were also present, their gazes mingling curiosity and tension. Mr. Harrison, the lawyer, was in the corner of the table, his face taut like a stretched string, his hands clasped together as if trying to hold something back. I looked at him, remembering when he was a young lawyer dedicated to my family, and felt a sharp pain in my chest. How had it all come to this? How could those who were once worthy of my trust turn their backs on me? Bethany smiled sweetly, her voice as soft as honey. Mom just needs to sign in the marked places. Sarah and I have already taken care of everything. Andrew also reviewed it and gave his signature of approval. All that's left is for you to sign so it's complete. Her words were like a sharp knife, but wrapped in a layer of tenderness. She mentioned Andrew, my son, as if she wanted to use his name to compel me. I looked into her eyes and saw that cold confidence that tore me apart inside. Andrew, the son I dedicated my whole life to, was now manipulated by his wife, and I didn't know how to get him back. I sat down. I took the pen with trembling hands. Outside, through the hallway window, I saw Liam standing, his big eyes fixed on me. He looked small and fragile, but his gaze was filled with determination, as if telling me not to give up. I smiled at him, trying to reassure him, though inside I felt I was on the brink of an abyss. The anonymous messages, the threats about Sarah's daughter, and even Andrew's distrust. It was all a storm dragging me into darkness. As I prepared to sign, Liam suddenly disappeared from the window. My heart skipped a beat. A cold fear ran down my spine. "Where's Liam?" I asked, raising my voice, unable to hide my anguish. Bethany smiled, her tone soft but full of intent. "I sent someone to take him outside to play so Mom can relax and sign." Her words were like a disguised threat, reminding me of that anonymous message about losing my grandson. My face turned pale, though I tried to remain calm, clutching the pen tightly in my hand. I feared something would happen to Liam, that Bethany had gone so far as to harm her own son to get what she wanted. Just as I was about to sign, Sarah suddenly stood up, slammed her hand on the file, and looked at me with eyes full of panic. "Please don't sign," she whispered, her voice trembling, as if she had crossed a line she had always feared. The boardroom fell into absolute silence, all eyes fixed on her. Bethany clenched her teeth, slammed the table, and let out an icy voice. "Sarah, what are you doing?" I looked at Sarah. I saw her tremble, her eyes red, but there was something in her gaze, guilt, desperation, and also courage, that made my heart pound. Sarah took a deep breath, as if gathering all her courage, and pulled a small USB drive from her purse, placing it in front of me. "It's all recorded here. Please, use it," she said, her voice choked. Bethany screamed and lunged to snatch the drive, but David, who was standing by the door, immediately entered and held her firmly. "That's enough, Mrs. Cooper!" David roared, full of fury, his hands trembling. I took the drive and connected it to the conference room computer. When Bethany's voice sounded clear and cold, everyone froze. "She won't have anything after she signs, Sarah. If you betray me, your daughter will die." Those words were like a knife, not just for me, but for everyone present. The shareholders began to murmur, their gazes shifting from surprise to indignation. Sarah burst into tears, knelt in front of me and sobbed. "Mrs. Vance, forgive me. I didn't want to, but she threatened my daughter. I looked at her and saw the pain in her eyes, and within me, rage and compassion mingled. Sarah, whom I had trusted, had been caught in Bethany's web, but she chose to stand up, even if it was late. I wanted to say something, to comfort her, but before I could open my mouth, the room door burst open. Liam ran in, his face pale but firm, followed by Martha and several local police officers. "Grandma!" he cried, hugging me tightly. Martha stepped forward, her gaze icy as she looked at Bethany. "I called the police as soon as Liam told me everything." Bethany, desperate, began to scream, "It's all lies! Mom, don't believe him!" She turned to me, her eyes pleading, but I looked at her steadily and replied in a grave voice, "The truth cannot be hidden forever. I've known it for a while." My words left her stunned, but inside me, there was no satisfaction. I only felt a deep pain because my daughter-in-law, whom I once loved, was now showing her true face. I thought of Andrew, how much my son would suffer when he learned the truth. I thought of Liam, my little grandson, forced to see his mother become a cruel person, and I thought of Sarah, who had the courage to speak, even if the price was to carry that wound for life. When Officer Davis, wearing a badge with the name Davis, stepped forward with a serious expression, the tension in the room became unbearable. He ordered Bethany to be detained for questioning, and she immediately began to struggle, screaming in a high-pitched voice, "This is all made up! That memory stick is fake!" Her face reddened, completely erasing the sweet smile I had known. She looked like a cornered animal, and although I had prepared myself, I felt my heart shrink. Not because I had compassion for Bethany, but because it hurt to think of all the years gone by, of those moments when I hugged her, believing she would be part of this family. Now, seeing her scream, I only recognized a stranger guided by greed. I turned towards Sarah and saw her slumped in the chair, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her hands trembled, pressing tightly against her chest, as if she was trying to hold something that was breaking into pieces. When the police prepared to take Bethany away, Sarah suddenly stood up, her voice trembling but full of determination. "Please, listen to me. I have to tell the truth." The entire room fell silent, all eyes fixed on her. I looked into Sarah's eyes. I saw the pain and torment in them and felt a knot in my heart. She, who was once my right hand, was now there, trembling like a leaf in a storm. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice choked. "Bethany gave me money several times and threatened me to help her. I did everything because my daughter needed surgery. I didn't want Mrs. Vance to lose everything. But if I didn't obey Bethany, my daughter would die." Her words were like a dagger, not only to me, but to herself. I saw tears rolling down her face, and I could feel the desperation in every phrase. Sarah had not only been forced, she was also trapped in overwhelming fear, convinced that her daughter was on the verge of death. I wanted to approach her, hug her, tell her I understood, that I didn't blame her. But I couldn't move. My pain was too great, not only from Bethany's betrayal, but also for Sarah, whom I had considered part of my family and who had had to endure everything in silence. Officer Davis carefully took notes, but another officer, with a look of distrust, intervened. "What's the child's name? Where is her medical file?" Sarah immediately replied in a trembling voice, "The child's name is Sophia Jenkins." But when asked for the file, she hesitated, her gaze lost. I have the documents, but I left them at home." Bethany, though David held her tightly, smiled sarcastically and said in a mocking voice, "She's making it all up to blame me." That smile from Bethany chilled my blood. She still maintained that confidence, as if she knew Sarah didn't have enough proof to sink her. I looked at Sarah, saw her with her head bowed, her hands clasped, and I knew she was steeped in confusion and guilt. Suddenly, Liam, my little grandson, stepped forward, his voice clear, though trembling. "I heard my mom say that Ms. Jenkins's daughter was never in any hospital." His words dropped like a bomb, leaving the room in absolute silence. I turned to Liam and saw the firmness in his eyes, though his face was still pale with fear. Bethany screamed in a shrill voice. "He's just a child! He doesn't know anything! Don't believe him!" But her words no longer held power. Sarah was stunned, her eyes wide, murmuring, "No, it can't be." She recoiled as if she had just received a direct blow to the chest. I saw the confusion in her eyes, and my heart trembled again. If what Liam said was true, then Sarah had been deceived not only by Bethany, but also by her own fears. Officer Davis immediately asked Sarah to hand over all documents related to her daughter. Sarah nodded, trembling, but in her eyes I saw absolute bewilderment, as if she was beginning to realize that perhaps she had been trapped in a lie all this time. I wanted to say something. I wanted to comfort her. But before I could open my mouth, the room door burst open. Andrew, my son, entered, his face full of tiredness and tension. He had just returned from a business trip, his shirt wrinkled, as if he had run straight from the airport to here. I looked at my son with a heart full of hope. I thought Andrew, knowing the truth, would be on my side, that he would understand that Bethany had manipulated everything. But then Andrew looked at me, and his gaze was not of compassion, but of disappointment. "Mom, why did you listen to Liam? He's just a child. How can you blame my wife just because of what the boy said?" My son said in a grave voice, but full of reproach. "Bethany would never do something like that." Andrew's words were like a direct stab to the heart. I froze, feeling as if the ground beneath my feet was crumbling. Andrew, the son I had dedicated my whole life to loving and protecting, was there, doubting me, defending the wife who had betrayed the whole family. The pain overwhelmed me, not only from Bethany's betrayal, but because Andrew, whom I thought would always be my support, was now turning his back on me. I looked at him, trying to keep my voice calm, though tears threatened to fall. "Son, I've only tried to protect this family. To protect you and Liam. But don't you see? Bethany has deceived us all." Andrew shook his head, his eyes full of anger. "Mom, you're too distrustful. Bethany only wants what's best for the company, for the family." His words were another wound, deeper, more painful. I felt like I was losing everything. Not just the company, not just trust, but also the son I loved most. The atmosphere in the boardroom seemed to have frozen. Only Bethany's shrill screams could be heard, as if trying to tear through the silence. She clung to Andrew, tears streaming down her cheeks, her voice trembling but full of drama. "Honey, I did it all for Sarah. Our daughter is dying. I couldn't stand by and watch an innocent child die." Bethany acted perfectly, as if she truly were a victim dragged into a conspiracy she didn't want. But I looked into her eyes and saw the falseness hidden behind the tears, and my heart broke. That wasn't the woman I once loved, whom I thought would support Andrew and Liam. She was there pretending to be a victim to cover her guilt. The pain of betrayal consumed me not only because of Bethany, but for having allowed her into my family and hurting those I loved most. Sarah collapsed into the chair, her gaze laden with guilt, as if reproaching herself for having dragged Bethany down this path. She said nothing. She just lowered her head, covering her face with trembling hands. I wanted to go over and tell her I didn't blame her, that I understood she was trapped by fear. But before I could do anything, Liam, my little grandson, stepped forward, holding a phone in his hand with unusual determination. "I have something," he said in a low voice, but Clara had opened a message conversation that Bethany had sent to someone and read aloud. "If Sarah doesn't sign, her daughter will die just like the previous one." Liam's words were like a bomb, leaving the room in absolute silence. All eyes fixed on Bethany, who was now pale, without a trace of the confidence she had shown. Sarah lifted her head, trembling, and asked, The previous one? What do you mean? My daughter was born perfectly healthy. She was only weak at first. Why do you say that?" Her voice broke as if she had been hit hard in the chest. I looked at her and saw the confusion and pain in her eyes, and my heart felt crushed. Sarah, who had lived under fear for her daughter, now faced a truth even more terrifying than she could ever imagine. At the same time, Mr. Harrison, the family lawyer, suddenly stood up with an old medical file in his hand, his face pale, as if he feared being arrested along with Bethany. "I can't stay silent anymore," he said, his voice trembling. "This file shows that Sarah's true daughter died a few hours after birth. That same day in the hospital, there was another abandoned girl without papers." Mr. Harrison paused, took a deep breath, and pointed directly at Bethany. "That girl was your daughter with your lover. You swapped her with Sarah's. You turned her into the sick daughter who needed saving to manipulate Sarah. All these years, Sarah knew nothing. That's why she blindly obeyed you." Mr. Harrison's words were like an earthquake. They left the room in absolute silence. Bethany screamed in a shrill voice, "Shut up, Mr. Harrison! You're making it all up!" But he didn't stop. His eyes reflected pure determination. "I have proof. It's all here." Sarah collapsed, covering her face as she wept inconsolably between pain and rage. "So all these years I've lived a lie. I betrayed Mrs. Vance only for a child who wasn't even mine." Her voice broke as if her whole world had just crumbled. I looked at her and saw an indescribable anguish in her eyes. My heart trembled. She had not only been deceived, but forced to make a terrible mistake, all because of Bethany's cruel lie. Andrew remained there, silent. The expression on his face changed from surprise to rage, and then to complete devastation. His gaze broke as he looked at Bethany, as if he suddenly understood that the wife he had always trusted was nothing more than a fraud. I wanted to run and hug my son, tell him I was there, that I would always be by his side. But I couldn't move. The pain overwhelmed me, not only from Bethany's betrayal, but for Andrew, who had doubted me, who chose to side with his wife instead of his mother. I thought of those past days, when I held Andrew in my arms and promised him a better life. Now he was there, shattered by the truth, and I didn't know how to heal that wound. Cornered, Bethany screamed in fury, "Yes, she's my daughter, but I don't need her. All I want is power and money." That confession froze everyone in the room. Even the shareholders, who only cared about profits, looked at Bethany with horror. I froze, unable to believe she could be so cruel, not only to Sarah, but also to her own daughter. They handcuffed her right there, still struggling and screaming, "You'll regret this! No one will be saved!" But as the police led her away, all I felt was a deep emptiness. There was no victory, only immense pain, because my daughter-in-law, whom I once loved, was now nothing more than a stranger. Andrew turned to me, his voice choked. "Mom, I'm sorry. I've been blind. I let Bethany manipulate me, and I even doubted you." He approached and hugged me tightly. I felt the trembling of his body in my arms. I wrapped my arms around him but said nothing. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay, but I couldn't. The pain was still there, not only from Bethany's betrayal, but because Andrew had made me feel alone in my own family. I just hugged him, feeling the warmth of my son, hoping that time would heal those wounds. Sarah, with pain, approached the police and handed over all the real evidence, the recording, screenshots of the messages, the fake contract, with a look full of determination. I made a mistake, but I won't allow her to destroy anyone else. I looked at her and saw a mix of bravery and remorse in her, and I knew she was trying to redeem herself. I placed my hand on her shoulder. I nodded gently, as if to tell her I understood, that I didn't blame her. Sarah looked at me, tears streaming down her face, and I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes, however small. I looked at Liam, Andrew, and Sarah, my heart heavy, but at the same time relieved. The brutal truth had come to light, and although it left deep wounds, I knew this was the first step to beginning to heal. A few weeks after that decisive day in the boardroom, I received news that Bethany had been formally charged with fraud, coercion, and conspiracy to appropriate assets. The police reported that her lover, the mysterious man who used to park the black sedan in front of my house, who had posed as a doctor to falsify documents, had also been arrested. He confessed everything, from collaborating with Bethany to create a false medical history to sending the anonymous threatening messages to me. Hearing the news, I sat silently in the living room, looking at the garden where the rose bushes were still blooming. But inside, I felt no victory. Instead, there was only emptiness, as if a part of my family had been torn away and nothing could ever reunite it. Bethany, the daughter-in-law I once loved, was now nothing more than a name in a police file, a painful memory I didn't want to evoke. The court considered Sarah a forced accomplice, but also a victim of this cruel scam. She did not receive a prison sentence, but I knew that guilt would accompany her for life. I thought of the past years, when Sarah was an enthusiastic young woman who always supported me during the toughest moments of the company. She had betrayed me, yes, but not out of ambition, but out of fear and love for the daughter she believed was hers. I didn't blame her, but every time I remembered what happened, my heart trembled, not only from the betrayal, but because I had allowed her to fall into that situation, trapped in Bethany's web. A few months after the sentencing, I decided to take Liam to visit Sarah. I wanted to see her, to know how she was living after so much pain. When we arrived, Sarah was in a small apartment, hugging a little girl. The child had big eyes, just like Liam's when he was small, and an innocent smile that deeply moved me. Sarah looked exhausted, her face drawn, but when she saw me, she smiled. A weak but sincere smile. "The child is not to blame," she said, her voice choked. "Even if she is Bethany's daughter, I have raised her with all my love. You don't have to give birth to be a mother." Sarah's words touched my heart, and I felt tears burning in my eyes. I put my hand on her shoulder and nodded. "I understand, Sarah. You are a true mother." Sarah looked up, her eyes full of tears. "You still trust me after everything I did?" I looked at her directly in the eyes, my voice low but firm. "Mistakes can be fixed. The important thing is that you had the courage to tell the truth." My words made Sarah burst into tears, but I saw a glimmer in her eyes, as if she had finally been freed from a burden. Liam, by my side, suddenly ran to hug Sarah's legs and whispered, "You saved Grandma. You saved me and my dad, too." His words left a lump in my throat. Liam, barely 10 years old, already understood the value of courage and forgiveness. I hugged him, feeling the warmth of his small body, and in that instant, I knew there was still hope for this family. I decided to legally support Sarah so she could obtain legitimate custody of the child, completely separating herself from Bethany. It was the least I could do, not only to redeem myself for my own doubts, but also to give Sarah a chance to start anew. She deserved to live a life not marked by lies. When I told this to Sarah, she squeezed my hand tightly and said in a trembling voice, "Thank you, Mrs. Vance. I will never forget what you did for me." I just smiled without saying anything, but inside I felt a little relief, as if a part of the wound was beginning to heal. Over time, my home slowly returned to calm. Liam became my daily joy. Every morning he would run to my room shouting, "Grandma, have a very happy day." His smile was like a ray of sunshine, dispelling the shadows that still lingered in my heart. Andrew, my son, began to learn about business from me. He would sit beside me in the office, taking notes attentively, asking questions, and little by little, I saw in him the maturity I had always expected. Andrew received many collaboration invitations from potential partners, and I knew that soon he would be ready to take over Vance Industries in my place. But most of all, I saw repentance in his eyes. He didn't talk much, but every time he looked at me, his gaze seemed to say, "Mom, I'm sorry." I didn't blame him, but the pain of being doubted by my own son still lingered, like a scar that never disappears. Sarah returned to work with me, this time as someone who received a second chance. She dedicated herself diligently without her previous insecurity. Little Sophia, Sarah's adopted daughter, was accepted into a nearby private school. For the first time, I saw her smile with joy, running in the yard with other children. Seeing that scene, I couldn't help but be moved. Although Sophia was Bethany's daughter, she was still part of this family, loved and protected by those who had survived the storm. At the annual company meeting, I stood up to speak in a grave but clear voice. Family, in the end, are not those who share our blood. They are those who dare to protect us in times of danger. I looked towards the front row, where Liam, Sarah, and Andrew were sitting. Liam smiled broadly at me and waved. Sarah nodded, her gaze full of gratitude. Andrew looked at me, and for the first time in many months, I saw in his eyes not only repentance, but also pride. They all smiled back at me, and in that instant, I felt my heart lighten. After so many storms, I had regained peace. I returned home, sat in the living room, and looked out at the garden where the rose bushes were still blooming. I thought of the years that had passed, of the days when my late husband and I built this family, of the sleepless nights, worried about Andrew and Liam. Although everything had changed, although the scars remained, I knew I had recovered the most important thing: love and family unity. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread within me, and told myself that although the road ahead still held challenges, I would never allow this family to break again. The story we tell is fictional, but it is based on some real events. Names and places have been changed to protect the identity of those involved. We tell this not to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and pause to think, how many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I am truly curious. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose silence to maintain peace, or would you dare to face everything to regain your voice? I want to know what you think, because every story is a candle that can light the way for someone else. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. If you enjoyed my story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can write more stories like this. Thanks a lot in advance. What about you? What would you do in this person's shoes? I'd really love to hear your thoughts, so drop them in the comments. I'm always curious to know what you think. Oh, and let me know where you've heard this story. If you want to hear more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many more waiting for you. Big hugs and see you next time.